Draw the curtains and expand your mind. It's time to get textual as we traverse the illicit pages of Wrongthink in the Forbidden Book Club.
All right. Now, I'm going to make a confession to you. I'm bookish, actually. I'm going to come out of my closet. I'm a book nerd. I like books. I'm interested in knowledge and ideas and what people think and what they thought before and what they think now and what they thought somewhere in between or way back when or whatever. I'm a book nerd, So I really wanted to do this section talking about books. And I wanted to talk about somewhat obscure books on the margins, books that are, like the title suggests, forbidden or, very obscured or kept underground or banned or whatever. Look, there's a lot of knowledge out there. The current era that we're suffering through has a lot of ripples, echoes back through history. A lot of people have been warning. They've been doing the canaries in the coal mine, like I said earlier. They've been sending these ripples to us from the past. So today I wanted to talk about a book, which is a book that is really important to me. I found it fascinating when I first saw it. It's called, can you see, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. Such a great title, isn't it? Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. It's not just a book. It's pretty relevant to where we find ourselves today. Now, this book has an interesting backstory. I first came across it inside another book. This book, Behold a Pale Horse. Let me see if I can hold it up so you can see it, by Bill Cooper. Bill Cooper is an interesting guy. This book came out in the early 90s. I can't remember where I found it, but I probably found it at Polyester Books or maybe Theosophical Bookshop or something. I can't exactly remember. A lot of these places have purged now. They don't exist anymore. Polyester Books isn't there, unfortunately, anymore in Melbourne. It's a Melbourne, Australia place. The Theosophical Bookstore, I'm guessing it still exists in Melbourne, but I'm assuming it's probably been purged of its spicier content by now. But, look, in the early 90s, you could find books like this around. It wasn't easy, but you could find them. And it's a sort of a compendium of various bits of conspiracy lore. And one of the sections, a chapter in this Bill Cooper book, is Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. The fascinating backstory, the alleged way that Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars was discovered, and it says this inside the book itself, is that it was supposedly written in May 1979, but it was discovered in 1986 inside a secondhand photocopier that somebody who worked for the Boeing Corporation in the US had bought on a sale or auction or something like this, I think, for the spare parts. And inside that sold abandoned photocopier, they found the pages of Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. Now, what it is, it's a short book. It goes through like 60 pages or something. It starts off positing itself as a secret document from the cabal, and its backstory being discovered inside this photocopier obviously adds to that mythos. And this is supposedly a secret cabal Bilderberger style document outlining what you would have to do in the broadest possible terms if you wanted to have absolute and minute control of society. And it organizes that and it advances that discussion in a sort of a mathematical kind of way, and using sort of electronics actually, electronic sort of circuit building and what they call shock testing, and extrapolates that to the whole of human society. And key to that is gathering massive amounts of data on people. Everything that people do, you want to gather that data. So when I first read this, I think the Bill Cooper book is from 1991 or 92 or something like this. I read it probably in 91, I think. What struck me about that, and obviously we could feel the encroachment of surveillance in our society, but I also felt, look at that diagram. I love it's full of diagrams like this one that Ed's got up on the screen right now. In capacitors and transistors, and it analyzes society as a sort of electronics schematic. And what I noticed is as more and more surveillance encroached upon society, and also the birth or the eruption of the internet was starting to occur, and what an incredible system for gathering massive amounts of data on people the internet might possibly be. So the bulk of the book is a sort of high level discussion of gathering as much data about people as you can, so that you can control them. Ultimately, it's all about control, and using what they call shock testing. So generating, producing shortages of food or products or industrial components. And then because you're gathering all this data, you can see how those shocks affect the whole of society. And also you can do them ideologically and politically. And you can measure how that affects society, so that you can use that data to better control society. There's some key moments in here. Look, I won't read you excerpts from it, but Ed, if you'd be so kind to put a link, I think it's available. This is an actual, book thing of it, but I think you'll be able to find it on the internet as a PDF or something. If you're at all interested, it's one of the seminal conspiracy documents, and they are interesting historically, absolutely, but I also think that they're really relevant to where we are now. And the idea of gathering massive amounts of data on people and how you might be able to use that data to control them down to the most infinite detail seems strangely relevant to me right now. The book itself has introduction and sort of an outro that is couched in quite strongly, harshly judgmental language, I guess you would say. It remarks quite often that people are no better than cattle, that they have no intelligence of their own, and people who don't use intelligence do not deserve to be treated as humans. They deserve to be treated as cattle, and other ideas that you might identify in the ruling elite of our society right now. I think that would be fair enough to say that they might operate on very similar principles. It's a mildly controversial book because it was accepted as being a sort of a leak from the cabal. This document was supposedly written in May 1979, I said, and that's actually inside there. And, it was supposedly discovered in this photocopier that had been sold as surplus by someone from the Boeing Corporation. And then it sort of leaked out through the conspiracy and Patriot Underground and these sort of things. And like I said, I first saw it in this Bill Cooper book. Years later, I think it was around 2003, a fellow by the name of Hartford Van Dyke came out and claimed authorship of Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. He said he had written it himself. He had written it not strictly as a political satire, but as a warning. He was a very advanced academically fellow, very schooled in high-level mathematics and economics. He said that he had cannibalized much of the content from studies generated at Harvard and the Rand Corporation in the 1950s and 60s. He actually mentions a couple of books in here. One of them was written by a fellow called Vasily Leontief, who had written extensively about controlling society through gathering massive troves of information, and how the approaching highly developed computer systems that were on the horizon in the 1950s should be used to gather mass surveillance of the society so that you could control it. And he says quite bluntly that otherwise there's a danger that the population will use this technology to actually liberate themselves from the ruling elite, and that's the last thing they want. So Vasily urged some haste. He said that they should try and achieve this within the next few decades. Otherwise, the population, there was a danger the population might liberate themselves with that same technology. Seems oddly relevant. Anyway, Hartford Van Dyke wrote this. He said it wasn't a satire, or supposedly he claimed authorship of it. He claimed it wasn't a satire, but it was a warning that he had cherry-picked most of the information in the book from these publicly available high-level documents and studies, as I said, from Harvard and the Rand Corporation. He lists quite a few of them in the document. Hartford himself is a really interesting fellow. I don't have enough time here to go into everything about him, but the last thing I knew about Hartford Van Dyke is that he was in jail in America for supposedly, he said he was a political prisoner, but he was supposedly in jail for generating community currencies, something that I guess the banking system didn't look too fondly upon, and he ended up in jail, Hartford Van Dyke, for doing that. He also had a very interesting family history. I have this very interesting document here. Yes, I'm a book nerd, okay. He wrote this about, it's called, can I get the whole thing on the screen? The Skeleton in Uncle Sam's Closet. This is supposedly generated from information from his father and his uncle, who were stationed in Pearl Harbor in December 1941. And his uncle said that he had received numerous warnings that the Japanese fleet were on their way to attack Pearl Harbor. He had sent those warnings to the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., where they had been dismissed and covered up, because the theory that he advances is that actually Roosevelt and other high people in the government wanted the Japanese to attack Pearl Harbor. In fact, they were goading them into it because they wanted in on the Second World War. Supposedly, Hartford Van Dyke's uncle and father were witnesses to this. They were witness to the cover-up and were deeply traumatized by it, in fact. And Hartford wrote about it in this 1973 kind of pamphlet-y newspaper thing that's probably like 20 or 30 pages long. Yes, I have one of those. Yes, I'm a book nerd, all right. I'm out of my closet. What can I say? If you're interested in Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, absolutely read it. It's fascinating. Big influence on me. In fact, I made a record under one of my monikers. Sometimes I call myself Black Lung, and in fact, I did this particular record with a few other people. The record, you probably don't know if you can see it there, is called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. It was a collection of odd sort of ambient industrial soundtracks that we made for over a couple of years. Came out in 1994. It's got potential chart-topping hits on it, like the Bilderberg Group and Rex 84 and other toe-tapping numbers like that. There was an Australian release, there was a German release, there was an American release, there was a Russian CD, would you believe? A legitimate Russian CD, because often CDs in Russia were pirates, but there was a legitimate one. There was also here we go, a picture disc, vinyl picture disc of the album as well. Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. There you go. That's my tiny contribution to the culture. I believe a couple of years after that, one of the guys from the Wu-Tang Clan, pretty well-known hip-hop guys, made a hip-hop album with the same title. And I think someone else made a hip-hop album a few years later of the same title. What can I say? This has been, you've probably had enough of me, haven't you, by now? You should have. This has been All Out of Bubblegum. I'm David Thrussell. Yes, I'm a book nerd. I've come out of my closet now. Thank you for allowing me that opportunity.